You never try NestJS? Because usually when you have already crossed the path of and let's get started. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Well, everyone is seated. That's okay. So in the back, you sure you don't want to come up front? Okay. Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to that NestJS/Node.js meetup. That's the first meetup of the year. So we get started with lots of resolution. Seems like people want to learn about NestJS, so hopefully we can get them convinced to go a bit further. A few words about myself. So I'm Edouard Malex. I'm co-organizing the NestJS meetup with Michael Latke from Pushbased. And developer, stuntman also from time to time. We organize this NestJS meetup to share some knowledge, to meet with some other people about NestJS. So hopefully you also get that vibe. So don't hesitate to also share between each other if you want to spread the knowledge, ask questions. Really don't hesitate to interact with each other. Quick bedtime story. We also merge with guys at Lincoders that organize the Node.js meetup. So this session is both for people into Node.js or NestJS. We have a good union coming here, so I hope you appreciate that. I hope we'll have more collaboration in the upcoming year. If you want, you can join the Discord channel. NestJS Vienna has a Discord channel. So if you want to come here, I don't know, maybe suggest some ideas of talk, or if you want to even present something for the upcoming talk, which I heard through the grapevine could happen around March. Just saying. If you want to propose something, don't hesitate. I'm quite grateful that we have this collaboration because it means that we can bring more people to that event, and what that means is that we can, well, have more motivation for people to come from Germany, some people that come from Poland, some people that come from Italy, from Czech Republic. So that's super nice that we can bring that motivation. I don't know if there are some people who come from other places than Austria. Yeah, but you live in Austria now, I know, so don't cheat. I'm also coming in Austria now. I have to admit. Anyone else? Where do you come from? You all come from Austria? Hungary. Hungary? Yeah. Okay, thanks to make the trip here. Anyone else come from outside of Austria? No? Okay, well, still thanks for making the effort. I'm
also cheating.
What do you mean?
I'm from Slovakia, but I've been here for years.
Okay, yeah, right, yeah, that's, yeah. Yeah, I understand that you want to keep your roots. I mean, I'm French, but I live in Vienna since 5 years, so I'm kind of Austrian. I just don't speak German. but that's fine. For now, it's still acceptable. Let's see what happens in the future. But for now, we can.
I would suggest a warm applause for all those people traveling so far.
Yes, that's what I wanted to do. So I can also do it lightly. Yeah, let's congratulate ourselves. It never hurts from time to time. Our agenda for today, we'll have a quick intro. We'll talk about the sponsors and a little thing that I wanted to do. Hopefully it will not be a flop, but let's see. We have to try sometimes and we should not fear to fail. We'll then start with the talks. Dustin will get started with his first talk, Multi-tenancy patent with NestJS. We will describe lots of pitfalls and share his experience with us. We'll have a quick break of 15 minutes, but that's more like French 15 minutes, so that will be probably a bit longer. So we'll have a food break and beverage. That will be also the occasion to exchange a bit about the Dustin session. Don't hesitate to harass him, that's why he's here for. We'll have then the second talk by Maciej Sikorski. Okay, kind of pronounced correctly. How to manage modules in NestJS? No? No, not that bad? Out of. Excellent. Okay, thanks. I came here for something. And then we will finish with raffle. So we'll have a little prize, and for each participation during a QA session. So yeah, we'll have a QA session after each talk. For each participation, you will have a ticket and a little prize at the end. I talk more about it after that. And then open end, let's see what happens. Let's see what we want to do at the end of this session, if we want to just go to sleep and forget about it or do something. A word about the sponsors. First of all, Lean Coders. Clap, clap, clap. So they provide the location, they provide the food, the beverage, they organize the thing here. So, well, that's really nice to provide this effort. They also, as I said, organize an Node.js meetup. And maybe Flo wants to say a few words about Lean Coders, or maybe he wants to forget I mentioned him. What's Lean Coders? For those who don't know.
What's Lean Coders?
Yes, for those who don't know.
Okay. Oh, thank you. So Lean Coders doing, no, I will start different. Welcome to the meetup. I'm glad you all made it. We'll keep it very short. Lean Coders doing custom software development, mainly with TypeScript. And so in the backend, we often go for NestJS. And yeah, that's it. We are happy to support the community, like hosting meetups like this, organizing Node.js. It's our way of giving back to the open source community. And yeah, we just try to give a little bit back and support the community here in Vienna. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot. Next sponsor is Push-based. So I guess I'll be the emissary, I guess, of Push-based, since I work Push-based part-time as a freelancer. Push-based is also doing some custom software developments. They have experts in the Angular NX community, NestJS, if we consider myself. That's a matter of opinion, I guess. And they help to also organize this event, and well, thanks to them. Thanks to Alex, who's also organizing a lot today. We have lots of time doing it. And that's those sponsors that can make this event possible. If you want, you can check this QR code if you are interested into the newsletter of Push-based. You want to receive some great content in your mailbox, or some articles or some happen in some event around Europe that some people from Push-based participate. Feel free to receive this newsletter and get some advertisement for free in your mailbox. The Raffles that I mentioned, it will be a JetBrains license. So at the end of the two talks, we'll pick those tickets, make a roll with a child neutral soul. We'll pick the ticket, and the winner will get a JetBrains license. So hopefully that person will enjoy it. I wanted, as I said, try something a bit new for that NestJS meetup. And since some people are really a lot into NestJS, they have quite an opinion. Some people are a bit more naive, if you allow me the expression. And personally, I am a bit curious. I mean, we had NestJS 11 that just was released a few days ago. And how to say, there is a kind of mysterious aura about the NestJS releases. You never really know when they will be released. You never really know what they will be into it. So that made me wonder, what's the future of NestJS? What will happen? What's the program? And I thought, why not ask that question to all the people who come here? And for those who want to express an opinion, well, that's an occasion to express one. Does anyone want to make a thought and explain or share just what do they think would be the future of NestJS, or their feeling about the future of NestJS? Or,
I will say that.
wait, just a second, I need to pass you the mic. Don't go too fast. Here you go.
I don't want to make any predictions, but I always say that Kamil works in mysterious ways. Kamil is the author. I don't think he's here. He's not, right? of NestJS. Yeah, he always pops out of nowhere with a new version or something, and that's how it works.
So,
Oh, some insights from a limited channel, I see. Yeah, I can also share one case. There was a time where not a lot was happening around the framework, and I was able to ask Kaim directly what's going on, and he said just he's changing his apartment. So,
quite funny.
so probably that's what he meant. But in general, I think this framework is quite stable. So there are just small improvements, no a lot of breaking changes. That's how I see it right now.
So what, you say that right now it's reached a stable point where it has enough feature to be production ready?
Yeah, that's how I see it.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks a lot.
Maybe someone has
I
another.
don't know, anyone
perspective.
wants to share an opinion? Don't be shy. Dustin.
Not an opinion, but I would like to see, runtimes like Dino or Bun, if it would be, if NestJS would support them, or vice versa, because then we just get performance for free, and that's a nice thing, and would also match nicely to like further like smaller improvements and not like a huge rewrite, because I think it's pretty stable, and it's nice that it's stable, so we don't have to rewrite anything like in other frameworks in the JavaScript ecosystem.
Great. Well, Camille, if you hear us, we have a wish. Back into the mic drop. Anyone else, please enjoy, because that's your occasion to share a message directly to the NestJS community, NestJS creator. If you don't want to take that opportunity.
Maybe they will follow
Take the mic.
maybe they will follow the path of Angular to switch to synchronous development.
What do you mean synchronous development?
Now they introduce the signals in Angular,
Mm-hmm.
and the main feature is this signals is to switch from asynchronous development to synchronous development. It's not possible to switch all the application to synchronous, because we have callbacks to the backend, and it will be asynchronous.
Yes,
But-
that's hard to switch. also.
Yes, but the majority of the app, it will be synchronous, and maybe
When you
NestJS
mean
will follow.
synchronous, you talk about the event loop, Node.js event loop, or you mean in terms of how the code is processed?
How you pass the values through the branches to other components, and they remove also the modules. We have standalone components and signals, and all the parameters they pass the values through the components synchronously.
I think this is something that seems difficult to achieve with NestJS, but
It's TypeScript.
yes, it's TypeScript. But
When
I
I
guess
worked-
the concept of module has maybe a bit more importance in NestJS, but
I worked a little bit with NestJS, and it was familiar to me just because it was something like Angular 16 or 17 or something like this. But since 19 version, they wanted to switch.
The gap is
Yes.
getting indeed larger and larger between Angular and NestJS.
Yes, but maybe you'll follow the path.
Let's see. I'm not the one deciding. I'm just the one transferring messages. Thank you. Would anyone want to share? I look at you, Daniel, because I think you could have something to say. No? Then, sure? Okay. Sure? Okay, no regret. Then let's get started with the talks, finally. Enough joke, enough blah blah. Sorry, our meetups also need some speakers. So for Node.js or an NestJS topic, if you ever want to share some knowledge and you feel like you really need to share that knowledge and drop it, maybe you can get in touch with people at Pushbase or people at Linkcoders and, well, get on stage and share your knowledge. And now, finally, we get ready. We'll get started with Dustin. So, Dustin, if you want to come, please. Yes, I don't even have to say it. Nice, people applaud. Yes. Mic transfer.
Thank you, man.
Sorry.
Too much stuff. You good with the hand?
All good.
Okay. Where do you want it? Can I put it here for you? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, thanks.
Beautiful as Vienna, and I'm the co-founder and CTO at SIMPL Technologies. SIMPL Technologies is a young startup that wants to digitize the industrial service industry. So in Germany, you know, there's a large industry with many, many machines that need to be maintained over time. But unfortunately, like this is done, the whole process is done like in a time when fax machines were a hot thing. So there's lots of potential to digitize and to accelerate. And when you build a startup or a SaaS startup, you hopefully have more than one customer. And once you do, and once you serve your application to many customers, you think about like, okay, how am I going to do this? Do you really clone your application for every customer, or do you think about something like multi-tenancy apps? And all these thoughts I have there, I want to share you with in a gist in this talk. So let's get to the agenda. First, we're going to talk about multi-tenancy in general, like what is that term? Maybe all of you know it, maybe some of you not, so this is like a warm intro. And then we're going to talk about 3 patterns, the silo pattern, the bridge pattern, and the pool pattern. And for each pattern, we're going to, of course, take a look at it. What is it? What are the trade-offs? What are the use cases? And some kind of implementation in NestJS. And after all these patterns, we have a small recap and an outlook on what could be next topics. So, multi-tenancy. So generally speaking, the question is your app capable of providing service to multiple tenants, for example, multiple users or customers, or do you need separate applications? So on the left-hand side, you have a single tenant application. For each tenant, 1, 2, 3, you would just clone your SaaS app, and there you go. So this doesn't look any different like if you would provision that for separate projects. That's the same. But if you have a multi-tenant app, you have like one SaaS application in this case that serves many tenants, 1 tenant, 2 tenants, 100 tenants, that's all fine. So what is the scope of multi-tenancy? Multi-tenancy can be applied to the entire system, just a component, or the data tier. So in this small sample here, you see that you have a small application consisting of a client, a backend, and a server, and in this case, we cloned it for all the 3 tenants. This would be like a single tenancy, no multi-tenancy at all involved. But the data tier is the most common use case, which means that we keep the client and backend the same for every customer or a tenant that sends a request and apply the multi-tenancy, for example, at the database or data sharing level. So the question then is, how are we going to manage multi-tenant data? Is there a silver bullet? Is there like the special solution I can give you? It's not, it's a spectrum. So there's a spectrum from isolated, so solutions that do not share data at all, to solutions that are highly shared. And the patterns we're going to look today is silo, bridge, and pool pattern, which are along that spectrum. But keep in mind that also hybrid solution exists. So it's not like there's only silo, bridge, and pool. You can also mix it, or you could think about, okay, for large customers, I might do silo, and for the smaller ones, I might do pool pattern. And why that is, we come to now to the patterns. So we're gonna start with the most isolated one. We are here. And this is basically the silo pattern. The silo pattern is all about not sharing anything, which means you have a shared nothing architecture. And when we take a look at that image below, we see that we have a web app, a backend, and then two databases for two tenants. So every time a tenant sends a request, we're going to route the request to a specific database. It could even be an own database server. This means also that we require some kind of catalog or mapping. So whatever there's a request, we have to route it to the right database. So what would be trade-offs for such a pattern? First, we have the maximum isolation, which is, I think, very crucial, right? So you can apply compliance or security alignments for each database individually. Also, if you have tenants or customers that really want a high-performance database, you can do that. And what's also nice that these databases are separate. So if one database goes down or is super busy, all the other customers are not aware of that traffic because this is isolated, they're not shared. Also, you have the flexibility to fine-tune and scale individually. For example, nothing's going to stop you to install certain database extensions in one database, but do not do this in the other one. And what's also nice that it's just a database, there's nothing new, so you can just use the usual backup and restore mechanisms. What are things that are not so nice? It's very resource intensive, so we have the infrastructure costs, which mean simply running the databases costs money, especially on cloud providers. Also, you have the operation and maintenance costs. So yeah, they run, but you also have to make sure that's all up and running, and that when there's an issue, you have to provide the team and the effort to keep it running. And also, if you want to analyze data across the tenants, maybe usage pattern or other information, this is going to be hard. So in overall, it has a bit of limited scale and a bit of compromised agility. So it's not that easy to progress with this silo pattern fast. So in the end, the question is, do you have the resources and requirements, business requirements to do this complexity? So team, budget, and time. But of course, there are very good striking use cases. For example, if you have enterprise customers which need specific performance or compliance requirements. This depends on the industry. Maybe if you have something like banking or military, then they surely do not want to have like mixed systems. Or if you have very heterogeneous tenants, let's say one tenant just processes a few requests and one does like many requests. They're not comparable at all. Then you can just provide different databases and you're done. And also, if you have a DevOps expertise, you can kill that complexity that comes with it with automation. So then if you can automate lots of stuff, then the complexity of this pattern is not that large. Let's talk about integration. So for the data infrastructure, mainly the database, what do you have to do? So first, you have to set up a new database instance or server for each existing tenant and for each new tenant. And also you have to add this tenant-specific infrastructure to your DevOps setup to make sure that it's up and running. And you also have to manage the backups and restores per tenant. For the application, in this case NestJS, what does it mean? We would connect to multiple instances or databases, and we would use the right database connection depending on who sends the request. And one issue there is, of course, that before we can create a new tenant, let's say your customer calls you and there's a new tenant, you first have to do infrastructure stuff, provision the database, and then you can proceed. So how are we going to do this in NestJS? All these examples are based on NestJS with TypeORM, which is, I think, very common to use it, but I think you can apply the same mechanisms to other libraries as well. So first we have to provision the new database and distribute the connection details, and then we're going to connect to the multiple databases. In this case, we have one database, it even has an own host for tenant 1 and a second one for tenant 2. All right, so we have the connection. And now we have to provide the tenant scoped connection to our services. And to do this, we're going to provide a NestJS provider with a connection part. So you can see here, it's a request scope provider. And whenever we get a request, we extract the tenant ID, and then we get the right connection from the connection map that we just instantiated. And how could this look like, this get tenant connection? Well, one very naive way of doing it would be to have a map that stores all the tenant connections. And whenever we ask for a tenant ID, we take a look at the map. Do we have this data source? If that's the case, we're going to initialize or do some checks and return it. And if that's not the case, we take a look at our map, pick the right credentials, spawn the data source, initialize it, and return it. So this provider is all just there to give you the right database connection. And when we're now on a service, let's say we're on a machine service, like in SIMPL, we are doing lots of stuff with machines. It goes like this. You would have an injection for this provider that we just have, and you could derive a machine repository there. Of course, you could also go with other decorators, but this is like a very easy way of doing it. So this machine repository is now tied to the database depending on the request. And when you want to create a machine, for example, you get a machine create DTO, you create the object, set the name, and hit save, and now it's stored in a database that belongs to the tenant who sent the request. That's one way of doing it. One thing that you could also think about if you have the silo pattern is to just clone all the things. So if your entire system tree is not that large, if you just have like client backend and database server, you can go even further and make sure that just every tenant has its own infrastructure, like even database server, backend, and so on. The neat way is that every system looks the same. Like you can train your developers once and they know, okay, every system, regardless of the customer, is structured in the same way. All right, now let's get a little bit more into the shared direction. So we are here. And what is the bridge pattern? Well, the bridge pattern basically is like the weird baby of isolation and sharing. It is a hybrid solution. What do I mean with that? When we take a look at a bridge pattern, we're going to share the database, but we're going to isolate by logical constructs like the schema. So for example, in this application here, we have a web app that connects to the backend. It connects to the same database server. This is different to the one before. And now we're going to get a tenant-specific schema. So for example, those are tenant 1 machines or tenant 2 machines. This doesn't have to be just one table. It could be many tables, but this is one way of doing it. And also there you have some kind of catalog, but in this case, it maps the tenant ID to the schema. What would be the trade-offs of this pattern? It's a true compromise, right? So it is clearly isolated by the schema, but of course the isolation is not on par with the silo pattern. Why is that? For example, if your database has trouble because one customer is really pushing the request, the database gets busy and all the other customers will know that. Also, it has less infrastructure costs because you're going to share the database, but it also suffers from an all or nothing availability. And what's also cool is that it's still flexible and allows tenant data customization. So nothing is going to stop you from applying changes to the tables in one tenant or changes to columns in one tenant, but the other tables in the other tenants are not aware of it. You can do still fine-tuning stuff. But it still has complexity later on, for example, when you're running migrations and backup, which you now have to do per tenant. What are the use cases? So basically, it's also somewhere in between. Like if you have a manageable amount of tenants, and this really depends on your use case, and the tables per tenant are limited, maybe roughly around 100 tables, then you have a reduced complexity compared to the silo pattern. You still have tenant customization, which other patterns might have not. It's a cost-efficient solution, and it still provides a decent isolation. So when you want to integrate it, what would you need to do? For the data infrastructure, you would set up a new schema for the existing tenants, new tenants, and you would also run the migrations per tenant. And regarding NestJS, it's the same, but just connected to the schema this time. You have to connect to multiple schemas, and you use the tenant scope database connection for each request. And the neat thing now is that creating new tenants can be done at runtime. You don't have to wait for the infrastructure people to do something. You can just do this within your NestJS code. For example, if you want to create a new tenant, we are now in some kind of tenant creation service. We get the tenant create DTO. We're going to hit save, create the tenant object, and now we come up with some kind of schema name, maybe tenant underscore tenant ID, so maybe tenant 1 or tenant 10, whatever tenant it's going to be. And then we're going to create the schema. And then, as before, we have some kind of function like getTenant connection that now picks the right schema from the database. At this point, the schema is completely empty, right? We just created it one line before. So what we have to do now is to run all the migrations, like setting up all the tables, triggers, whatever, for that schema. And then we hit close, and our tenant is now ready to be served. Then we would also need a tenant scope connection to use that in our services. In this case, it's also the same, or very, very similar. You have, again, a request scope provider. You get the request, you extract the tenant ID, and then you pick the right schema from the database map. And also, this looks pretty similar, right? You have an injection of the same token. In this case, we named the token in the same way. This is nice. Dependency injection, just like we know it in NestJS. We can get the machine repository. And even this code looks the same. So if you watch carefully, this looks the same as the silo pattern. And this is really nice because the dependency abstraction happens on a database level. So we just switched the isolation from a database one to a schema one. So for the NestJS repository, those two things pretty much look the same, which is a nice abstraction. Of course, there are some leaks, but generally speaking, it's a nice abstraction. Let's do something more different. We're going to come to the pool pattern. So we are here. It's not going to get more shared than this. And what is the pool pattern? The pool pattern might be your first naive solution in implementing multi-tenancy at all. So we're saying, okay, maybe I just mash everything together, add a tenant ID column, and whenever I'm going to query for data, I'm going to specify this tenant ID. And this is basically what it is. So we're going to share the same database. We're going to share the same schema, as you can see. This is all the same. And then in this table, we introduce a new column, which is called tenant ID. And as you can see, the first 3 machines belong to the first tenant, tenant 1, and the last 3 machines belong to tenant 2. So the isolation now happens just by a column. What are the trade-offs of the pool pattern? It's share all, go fast. So what the most striking aspect is agility. Adding tenants and migrations are a breeze because it doesn't make a difference if you have 1 tenant, 10 tenants, 100. You just hit the same migration and you're done. Also, the deployment is simpler because you have smaller systems to operate and monitor, at least to a certain scale. And if you want to scale a high number of tenants, then this is the one that doesn't put a limit on you. You can progress with it very fast. And of course, it's the most efficient solution since you can since you mash everything together in 1 DB, you can put the most tenants per database. But as you might see, it's also the least isolated solution, right? Before we had an entire database as an isolation level, then we had the schema, and now it's just 1 column. So tenant customizations are also tricky and limited. Either you introduce lots of columns that might be null columns for many customers, or you add something like a JSON support or a JSON column. Also, the backup or restore mechanism got a little bit more complicated because now you have to be aware of extracting just the tenant either at backup time or at restore time. And of course, you need to have a careful code structure or discipline to remember to add this right query code. What are still good use cases for the pool pattern? So if you want to have a given medium security and compliance requirements for scale, if you have many similar tenants which are small to medium size, then this is for you. Also, if you want to save money, it's the most cost-efficient solution. So best usage tenant per database. And also very striking is the agility. You can progress and grow very fast, even with a small team, and you have less components to maintain until you hit a certain scale. How could we integrate it? It's very straightforward. So we would simply add the tenant ID to each table. The migrations can be kept simple, just if you had 1 tenant. And as I said, only the backup and restore procedures would be hard to do. And regarding the applications on NestJS, we have to remember to add to each query the tenant ID. And creating tenants is the most easy stuff right now. You can just create a new row. So a naive approach, how could we do it in NestJS, would be to just get the tenant ID from the request. And in every query, we're going to add tenant ID is the tenant ID from the request. What's also interesting is that this time in the constructor, we just inject a regular data source. So this is not like a tenant scope connection. This machine repository in this code sample has access to all the machines. So whenever we're going to hit find 1, we have to make sure to add the tenant ID. And I already added a small bug in this code, so you see I have the machine ID and a tenant ID, and my IDE won't yell because I used the tenant ID, but I didn't specify it at find. So when I would query for data, and there are machines from 2 tenants with the same ID, I would get all the machines. So the issue here is basically this. You have to remember each time to add a tenant ID, otherwise this might be your famous last words. So is there someone or something that could help us from this misery? And there is something. And its name is row-level security. It can protect you from leaked tenant data, complex code, so you can sleep peacefully at night. And how does it work? Or what is the goal behind it? So it's a database feature. It's nothing that like NestJS provides you. And the goal is to only work with the current tenant, only with the rows for the current tenant. And you define a policy that filters the rows based on a tenant ID. And the neat thing is that it's deny by default. So now if you forget to add something, you will get just no rows. And if you don't do it right, you get the rows just for your tenant. And this is pretty cool and adds more security. And also this policy can be applied to all the queries like select, update, delete, and even insert. So this sounds great, right? So let's give it a try and let's see how this works. We're going to start with a small sample. This is just SQL, nothing special. We're going to create a basic table structure, a machine table with an ID, the tenant ID, a name, and a status of the machines. Important here is just that we have 2 tenants, this one CF tenant here with 2 machines, and this 69 AD tenant, the tenant 2 with the other 2 machines. Nothing special so far. So let's structure such a row-level security policy. First, we're going to enable row-level security for the table, because if you forget it, then there's no such security there. Then we're going to create a policy. We specify the table and also the policy name. And then the most important part, the condition. So the tenant ID, or what this condition says, is the tenant ID must match the currently logged in user. So if I'm logged in as user 1CF, what's its name, then I could just read this data. And it says there, using is just for select, update, and delete, and with check is for insert. But I also told you this PostgreSQL has sensible defaults. So implicitly, it's going to do this. If you forget to add with check, it's going to be inserted anyway. So let's test our policy, right? Let's create a user that has the same name as our tenant, and we're going to log in. And then we hit select, we're going to select all the machines, and this would be your result set. You just have this result set, nothing from tenant 2. And what about the other operations? So if you would hit update machine, in this case we would pick machine 3, which belongs to the second tenant, you would get nothing, because the row-level security filters those rows. There's nothing to update, so there's also nothing to see, no machine with that ID, so what do you want to update? The same applies to the delete. We even specify the tenant ID from the other tenant's ID. We use it there. But since it got filtered before, there's nothing to delete. And also for inserts, you even get an error there. If you want to insert a machine in another tenant's table, it will even throw an error. So this is pretty cool. Yay, we made it. So what have we achieved? It works, this is always good. And it's a much cleaner design. So the separation of concerns is much better. The database now enforces the isolation, and the application now can focus on the business logic or user filters. So isolation is enforced at the database level. What's not so great? Well, it's a bit clunky to manage, right? You have to create a new user for each tenant, and you also have to log in before you run any queries. That's also not that great. So maybe we can do it better, and we can. One thing that how we can improve it in a way is using a parameter-based approach. So our goal is now to set the scope without requiring this extra database user per tenant. And we're going to do this by changing our policy. So there we have our policy just as we created it before. And now we're going to change this. So first it was comparing tenant ID to a current user, and now it compares tenant ID to some kind of session variable. And what are those session variables? Those are scoped to the current connection. And let's first give an example on how you'd use it before I explain how they work. So this is basically what you would do. First, you had your you had your usual query, your select from machine, and now you're going to wrap it. You first set the tenant ID to the one that you want to have. Like this is now set for the entire session of the connection, and in the end you should also reset it. That's like good manners, right? And then you just put your query inside. And the variable is scoped to the current session, which means it's safe in multi-connection applications. So whenever you're going to get a request, you get a new connection from the pool, you can set a session variable there, and it's scoped to that session. So it doesn't, every connection has a separate copy, and it cannot access or modify the sessions variables of other runtimes. There are only issues if you use something like PG Bouncer, but for smaller use cases, that's fine. So it's safe to use in multi-connection applications, and you can do it also by transaction. In this case, you would use set local and not just set. So how would such a flow then look like? Let's say this could be an example. You have your user that sends an HTTP request, for example, with a JSON Web Token. Then there's your backend. It's going to extract the ID from the JSON Web Token, and then it's going to wrap all your queries when it gets then a connection from the database by setting the tenant ID first in a parameter. Then it's going to run your query, whatever it's going to be, and then it's going to reset it. And the database, now reading this parameter, just going to return the filtered data to the backend. You send it back to the user, and everybody's happy because the user just get the data. He's allowed to see. So how would we integrate it or integrate this parameter-based approach in NestJS? So generally speaking, we would need some kind of custom middleware to set a parameter after acquiring a connection, right? Because before it was enough to just inject a database, but now we have to make sure whenever we get a new connection from that pool that we set the right parameters. And we could come up with that stuff ourselves, or we can rely on a NestJS community for our rescue. For example, there's a neat package called RLS, the row-level security package for TypeRAM in NestJS. And it's going to do exactly the stuff that we want to do. So as you can see, the provider or the code roughly looks the same as before. You get the request, then there's a tenant model options, you extract some kind of tenant information. But now there's something new, there's like a row-level security connection. And then somehow it works. And if you like me, you also like to look under the hood. So let's give it a try and see what is this RS connection. And basically this is a connection that whenever you ask for a query runner, so the thing that actually runs your query, it's gonna give you a modified one. And it's really not that hard code, so let's go quickly through it. This is original code from the library, by the way. So the first one is a set options in DB command, which is basically just the SQL query I just showed you, setting the RLS tenant ID. Then there's another one, which basically just resets the tenant ID. And then it basically hijacks the usual query function of the query runner. So you you first set your tenant ID with the function I showed you. Then you're gonna hit super query. So you're gonna run the actual query that was intended to be run. Now that it's gonna be scoped, right, due to our policy. And in the end, you're just gonna reset it and you're done. All right, I hope that this is not you, but if you are, then we're going to have a little bit of a recap to talk about what we've saw so far. Okay, so what do we have covered? We talked about multi-tenancy in general, so what is that thing? And then I showed you 3 patterns, the silo pattern, the most isolated one, which connects to separate database servers or instances. Then the hybrid solution one, where you connect with the same database server, but you separate by schema or other logical constructs. And then the pool pattern. Then we started with a naive approach where we just hit ID to every part, and then the RLS row-level security approach that enforces this isolation on a database level, and one time with the database user, and then the even more dynamic one with a parameter. So the question in the end is, which pattern is the best? Which one should I use? And I hate to say it, but of course, as always in software architecture, this depends. And what does it depend on? You need a holistic view on all the various aspects of like your business, your architecture, your team. So business, what is your growth? What is your strategy? What is the industry you're working on? For example, things might be out of scope if you work in military financing, whatever. Then what is your team? What is the size? Do you have expertise in infrastructure automation? Maybe then you could more lean into the silo pattern. And the agility, what is the expected agility? Are you like, do you have to accelerate maybe? And know your customer, right? You have to know the number of tenants you want to have. The size of the tenants, are we talking about enterprises or small to medium-sized businesses? The variety of tenants, are they very different? And also the usage patterns. So if you have tenants that always want to access like 100% the app just from 9 to 11 in the morning, then this is very different to tenants that just hit requests over the usual workday. And of course, things like infrastructure. For example, if you're on-premise, on a customer side, you might be limited in the way of architectures or technologies that you can choose. And when you maybe have a cloud provider, this cloud provider can give you some goodies that make things maybe even easier. And let's take a look at the things that we did not cover, our outlook. So what we didn't talk about are hybrid solutions. I mentioned them in the beginning. Maybe you could also create an architecture where you have where you use the pool pattern for small customers, or maybe free trials or demo tenants or whatever. And for large enterprises that do not really want to negotiate, you just spawn a silo for them. Then there are also systems that have row-level security as a first-class citizen. For example, Nile.dev is a re-engineered PostgreSQL database that just focuses on multi-tenancy. And this is really something you could check out. Or Supabase, which is a backend as a service, which uses row-level security for role-based access control. But the step to implementing multi-tenancy is not that large. We didn't cover patterns at scale, right? So what does it mean if you have like 1 million tenants or 1,000 tenants? There are, for example, extensions like silos that really ensure that in a pool pattern, you extract the rows even to different regions. So even though the table says all the machines are on one table, the table is physically distributed depending on the tenant ID. Even this is possible. And the issues with connection sharing, for example, with PG Bouncer, this is some more advanced stuff. Then depending on your team, automation for silo pattern, right? So if you're if your team is very automated, maybe the complexity of the silo pattern is not that large. Or if you have a cloud provider that has specific goodies, for example, Azure SQL has an elastic pool where you have a fixed price, and then it just distributes the resources among the databases. So suddenly the costs are not that high anymore. And the last one, there are like new databases on the horizon, at least to me. Those are like SQLite databases on the edge. For example, you can spawn a small database for each user or for each customer on the edge, very close to the system. And technologies, for example, are Turso or Cloudflare D1 SQLite databases. So yeah, that's all, folks, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
That was lots of knowledge and wisdom. By the way, was it the first time that you
A tech talk, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I guess that's impressive. I mean, if you are not, me, I am.
Yes, thank you.
I was curious. I will just enjoy the benefit of being your organizer to ask questions before anyone else can do. How long did it take you to make that research? Because you went into so many directions, from the silo to the bridge, to sharing. Did you explore all those directions, all those design possibilities on your own, or you were doing it with your teams?
Sort of. In the startup I worked before, there was this bridge pattern installed, and I wasn't so sure about it, if it's going to scale. And when we started SIMPL, so our startup, we started with a silo pattern, but then I noticed, okay, our focus is not like providing super secure systems to very small and medium-sized businesses. We have to ensure that we're going to grow as a company and with our customers. So we went for the pool pattern. This is how I got in touch with like a little bit of all of them. But it's not that rarely that you're going to switch. So if, for example, our team grows and our DevOps expertise grows, and maybe also our customer that we're going to address grow, maybe we're going to switch to pool pattern. That's still on the table. But yeah, it's I think important to know that these options are on the table to know which one you're going to pick.
If any one of you has questions, that's the occasion. I can pass the mic to you. I'll give you a ticket after that. Anyone has a question? Start in the front. Go back. Sir.
Thank you. So if I can recap, I understand it like how do you solve the question of security and performance, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And now apart from the security question, like when does the single backend app becomes a bottleneck? And, what's the traffic scope? When would you really consider to go into the silo architecture?
This really depends. You can horizontally scale your backend. This is not tied to the database. So database might not be the issue. The backend might not be the issue. The issue would be more like the database. And it really depends on the data you put into it. So, and of course, like putting the right indices on your columns. I thought that there was like a limit at like super scale. But for example, Azure has a database, it calls every database Cosmos. I don't know why they do it, but Cosmos is a NoSQL database and also SQL database. And they have Cosmos for PostgreSQL, and then they use this Citus extension, which means that if you're going to query data for, I don't know, tenant 1, it goes to a completely different replica of it. So then you have your scale basically back. But I'm not sure if this is, I mean, if you have to configure it yourself, I think that's pretty hard, and you have to really have to know your PostgreSQL to do it, but there are managed solutions that keep this pool pattern alive even when your scale is super large.
Cool, thank you. So that means that the backend doesn't become a bottleneck, more likely.
Yeah, you can scale that horizontally, so it's not the issue. The issue is more on the database side, or if you do very complex queries, or if you extend your policy with, I mean, I just added a small check, like is the variable equal to the tenant ID? But you can also add there a nested query. So and if you have to evaluate a nested query every time you're going to add search for data, of course this is not going to be beneficial for the performance.
Satisfied? Here you go. I have them. Well, also to complete another question, maybe something that's implicitly mentioned, I think, by Dustin is that for a backend app to be able to be scaled is that, well, it needs to be scalable, so it needs to be stateless and in general follow the 12-factor app. So you need to have everything that allows you to spin multiple applications of your same application, so multiple workers or threads of the same application, because it's based on Node.js and Node.js run on a single thread. So that's an implicit fact that's good to keep in mind when you are working in a Node.js application. Okay. Just wanted to add up on it. So it's like managing concurrent tasks basically on the single thread? It depends how you see it. You could have indeed some jobs that do some very specific processing, or you could just have your whole application which is totally stateless, so it can have, you can run it as a cluster of multiple workers. And in that case, then what's the limit is how much in general your application performs and how much you can afford to host your application. But limit is kind of virtual, and it depends on your design. Just, yeah, I won't add that too much. I think I saw a hand over there. Sorry, front, I think you were first. Thanks.
Hi, how do you automate the work with migrations at bridge pattern? For example, if you want to generate the migration specifically for one of the tenants and not for the other, is there a way that at NestJS you like programmatically do that without manually creating the migrations by hand?
I mean, if you're using type ORM as I did in this case, you would basically switch. Depending on the tenant you want to generate the migration to, you also have to switch it in the same way. So, for example, if you usually route your request for tenant 1 to this config that points to database 1, when you want to generate a migration, you would also tell type ORM, like maybe with a CLI command or some kind of extension, to use this specific database inside it. But this is not tied to the multi-tenancy pattern. This is more like type ORM stuff. It might still be hard if you have to do it, I don't know, for 100 tenants all separately, then I think you need some kind of scripting there.
Thanks. Anyone else? I think I saw a hand over there before that. Here you go.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I really rarely see that level of preparation, and so well-structured presentation. I don't have a question, but more a discussion maybe, or a comment, because from my experience, the most important thing is actually not where you start, but where you go, because I worked with a lot of SaaS startups, and with some already established companies. And sometimes even if you plan that you will start with the specific approach or you have specific type of customers, you don't know where you will end or what kind of customer life will bring to you. So, and I think it's just important to keep in mind and know all the possibilities and to see how it goes. Because, for example, yes, you plan that pool strategy is the best and you will serve medium-sized customers, for example, with that. But at some point, you get the customer who obliged to certain compliances. And even if he preferred to work with your cloud, for example, he simply can't do that because of the compliance. And you are forced to very quickly come up with some solution. So, and another thing is also depends on the specific products you serve. For example, a lot of customers would like some customization, and in this case, you may be forced to go to isolation approach, even if you don't want to. So it's always a question how market will want to use your solution. For example.
That's true. So we already came across like a customer that didn't want to have like a solution shared. In the end, the deal didn't work out, not because of the technology stack, but if the customer would be large enough, then of course we would need to come up with some kind of hybrid solution. This is the point then where we are, in which we left out in the, or that we just mentioned in the Outlook. But I think then this is even harder to give a certain structure there, because then I think it's super custom to your specific use case and in company and customer. Yeah, but the question always is, where do you end up, right? That's hard to do.
Yeah, it's always important to find a balance, because from my experience, in one company we had customers like a winery in Mexico, for example, which is fine with whatever pool solution you have. On the other hand, we had a customer like military, Department of Defense, so military, from a large Middle East country. So totally different approach. So, and it's, yeah, so basically sometimes we had to build a special team for special customer. So, and yeah, deal with whatever, yeah, compliances they have.
Yeah, I can imagine that this is going to be hard to do with one team to serve such different applications, which in turn serve different kind of customers.
Yes and no, because sometimes they sell too much what you don't have right now. So especially in startups, so that's sometimes very annoying. So they sell something you don't have right now, and you have to deliver within 6 months or something, or sometimes even less. So yeah.
A message to the salespeople who don't listen to us.
Yeah,
be careful
true.
what you sell.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's that's a good, yeah. Good thing. So.
Let's exchange. Get Mike. Hand over there. I think there was a hand over there first. Sorry, I try to. Don't lose your question.
I wanted to get your opinion on something that you briefly touched, because you said the pool variant is like the most scalable solution if you have a growing amount of customers. And what do you think about open sourcing your core system, and this will give you the freedom to outsource the complexity of spinning up infrastructure for maybe a handful of customers that need these kind of customizations, or PII security, whatever it is. And you could still make, like from a business perspective, you could still offer consulting services for these kinds of customers. But in your core business model, you go with the pool route.
So you suggest if we basically cut out the core of our application, how we're going to do it with pool pattern, and then put it like on GitHub, and then provide like consultancy services around it.
Yeah, I mean, the consultancy stuff is optional, but generally that's the thing that many SaaS companies do, that they just open source their code and provide a free on-premise, paid on-premise solution.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also like spin up the service yourself if you want to deal with all the infrastructure stuff.
I mean, for the core, I think our team is too small to support this. I mean, you can also argue then maybe the community will take over there. Regarding the entire application, since we're on like small and medium-sized businesses in Germany and in industry, those are like, I recently had a call where we have to explain the term API, so there's like they're not going to be contributors. Let's keep it that way. Yeah. I think where it makes more sense is to re-engineer actually the database, so the thing that Nile Dev did. Mm. So you don't have to think about all that stuff in your application. You just connect to a database that is multi-tenant and does all that stuff for you. I think this is, if I could do it, I think I would do it this way and provide a service for this, but it's a good idea. Maybe we do it once our team is bigger and give back to the community.
Yeah, thanks.
That's great. Indicate against the mic.
What's that anyway?
What is that? You did not even listen. That's for the raffle.
I came too late, sorry.
Ah, okay. Well, me sorry. You will see later then. Actually, you had a question. You still have for a question?
Yeah,
the
sure.
energy? Okay.
I have a question regarding the request scope providers. Have you noticed a performance issue? Because when database connection is request scoped, basically the whole application is request scoped. Do you see any performance issues due to this decision?
Yes,
or
I was prepared for this. I have a backup slide.
I'm here for you.
Yeah, so there's an issue. So for everyone who's not that familiar, so if you use a request scope provider, this means everywhere we're gonna require this super tenant scope connection. Everything gonna be recreated, the entire dependency tree for each request, which of course is not that great. What you could do is have durable providers, which basically stay in memory, and you can reuse them once the next request comes. And what you could do there is to use the tenant ID as the aggregate. So whenever there comes a request with the same tenant ID, NestJS will remember to not throw this dependency tree away, but reuse it. And this works for a limited amount of tenants. At least it works fine for us. But I think the even better approach is to use to avoid the request scope entirely. But I did not try it yet, but I want to. Using AMC local storage or NestJS CLS package. The community has got you covered there again. Where you basically avoid the request scope, and whenever you're gonna ask for a certain database connection, it will be transferred there without the entire NestJS part. So it's living in async local storage. It's a bit hard to explain if you're not familiar with async local storage, but there are ways, let's say, that where you can keep or save some performance. First would be durable providers, because this is a NestJS core feature, and then avoiding request scope would be something maybe for a future talk or blog post. I want to give it a try.
Fun fact, haven't you created it?
Yeah, I'm the author of NestJS CLS, by the way, so ask me.
Yeah, we have the maintainer of the NestJS CLS
I think
here.
you even have talked, right?
So
are you Paput?
Yes.
Ah.
do you want to mention it, or do you want to give him some tips maybe after the talk? Ah, great.
I was actually planning to talk about it at some point, but yeah, you can find me on at the break, and we can have a chat about how async local storage works in Node and how you can use it in Nest to transfer the context without request scope. Yep.
Yes, for those who are curious, you can have a look at async hooks in the Node.js documentation. That's really black magic stuff happening over there, that you can really transfer data into an async operation and make it available. You don't have to transfer it across function argument or lots of messy stuff. So yeah, for those into Node.js and who don't know about it, maybe have a look. No question? Still some?
Sure.
Yeah, ready for the battle. Yeah, well, you still need the mic.
Because we brought that up. Did you implement that in your project because you felt the need for it, or because it's good practice all over?
You mean the URL providers?
Yeah. Did you feel a performance?
I tested it locally, and even when I noticed it locally, I thought, okay, we're going to be even worse on a server, and then I just tried it because it's really easy to do.
Right.
But I think maybe if you have a decent server, then it's going to be fine for the. I don't know. It depends on the size, on the amount of your tenants. Probably it's going to be fine for a few, but then it's going to come to a mark where you say, okay, maybe we can optimize. And this was the low-hanging fruit I wanted to try out, and then I just gave it a go. But the NestJS CLS package is actually the thing I think would be the best solution.
All right, nice, thank you.
Anyone else has a question? Wow, it never stops.
I looked into row-level security, and it looks really shiny, and I think we know that shiny things like a silver bullet do not exist in software development, right? And I wonder if you want to share some pitfalls or how you shoot yourself in the foot with some things.
There are still ways to shoot yourself in the foot, of course, especially if you're out of the usual NestJS request context, because NestJS, like if you get an HTTP request, everything is fine. But if you're like having a cron job or some other kind of event, you need to make sure that you spawn the same context. And for this part, you need to make sure that this tenant ID is again set, because if you not do it in this kind of scope, you would get all the providers by default, which and then you would leave this tenant scope. This would be an issue. And one pitfall that I mentioned, but I didn't show you in detail, is like when you want to run backups or restore procedures. Because right now we're doing like an entire snapshot of all the data. But if there would be a customer that says, I want to just have my data restored, we would be in trouble, and we would need to come. We have a script for this, but you have to maintain it and have to make sure that it's up to date. So this is not that nice. But at least for our application, the request that they want to have a snapshot like for 7 days ago and just the data doesn't really work, because there's like data changes all the time, and they're not interested in restoring a state from 7 days ago, because then the business data will be gone. So for this case, it's fine. But if you have if you have to do restore and backups very often, then this is not that nice, or you have to get going with some scripting to make it nice.
Does it indefinitely scale, or are there any limits?
So row-level security?
Yeah, each table which does have it needs a tenant ID, right? So you need a separate index on each table. So I wonder if you really have really large tables which maybe do not have a tenant ID, because they are joined through other matters.
Well, this could
have a problem.
This could be optimizations. Maybe one day when we're going to aggregate like machine sensor data, there's going to be probably a large volume. Then we maybe going to think about this. So far, we didn't have issues. And as I said, the more managed databases also provide you ways of scaling this to different regions and achieving super scale. But yeah, maybe when you come to this kind of scale, then we are back at his question, and then maybe it's a different customer where this doesn't even work. I can think of using the super large row-level security databases probably for B2C use cases, because then every user is somewhat limited in its growth, while a B2B customer can be potentially very large.
Okay. Okay, I see that we have one last. That's the last one.
Last
Okay.
one, yeah.
Okay.
Is it feasible to use the pool approach with MongoDB and Mongoose?
I didn't try that with MongoDB. I don't even know if maybe someone knows if it has row-level security. I mean, you could implement it just in a naive way, where you just have to remember to add where tenant ID equals tenant ID. And there are successful projects that do this. So it's not impossible. It's just something that is not that nice to do. But I don't know if it's going to work with MongoDB. Sorry.
Order a ticket. Okay. Lots of questions. It seems like the topic get people curious. Thanks
Nice.
for sharing all that knowledge. I have
Just a short question, because like
Oh.
you basically practice with Postgres, right, all the time.
Yes, this is also possible with a SQL Server from Microsoft, but then you have to work with SQL Server from Microsoft. I'm not a big fan. I think also other SQL databases have it, but I just know about these two.
I will use my superhost power for last one question, because some people are discovering and hearing first about NestJS, but you did not really mention what moved you towards NestJS. And I would be curious to know if you compared and did some benchmark with other framework or with some plain Express.js or Fastify, and what guided you through that design decision from the beginning. Maybe that can help people who also try to evaluate NestJS at the moment.
Yeah, we started, I think, two and a half years ago with NestJS, and I also used it in a startup before, and then I already liked it. And I think the key point were when we used like Express and like in personal projects and other stuff. It was nice for smaller scale projects, but at a certain point you mess up. At least if you maybe if you have done it like 100 times or many times, then you also have your own Express structure that is that also works and is scalable. But then maybe new developers that come to your team also have to know about it, and it's easier to just follow a convention that is it's battle tested, it's well established. You can point new people to the official documentation. They can get their hands dirty, and then they can just join the team. And also, I like that NestJS was stable and not just and wasn't about to born and die like many other frameworks.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a solid foundation, and this is why we went with it.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for the answers, and I think we can maybe applaud him one last time. Thank you a lot. Very great. Time to take a quick break, because it seemed like not really on time, but I guess that's usual with a meetup. We're not professional organizer, we just do our best. So normally it should be 15 minutes. I guess there must be some pizzas waiting over there, if I'm not teasing wrong. We're waiting. So in fact we are not that late on the schedule.
Between 8 and 8:15, so let's see.
Okay, should arrive soon. I guess we can just take a walk, just enjoy the office, and then after that, let's say in 30 minutes. Yeah, let's say 30 minutes. Yeah, 8:45. We continue with our second speaker, and I will try again, Maciej Sikorski.
I believe you.
Huh?
I believe you.
Yeah, I mean, not it hurts that much, but yes, you both use your both hands to do work, and then you start to notice that even if you are writing, this one is kind of useful.
Yeah.
Yes, we are ready.
What's up with the TV?
What's up with the TV, by the way? Good question. Where is the remote? You had the input. I guess it's supposed to be intuitive.
Looking good?
Yes. Like a quick intro, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Hey everyone. I think everyone is back here. Yes, I see someone coming in. For the second talk, we will have Maciej, who will talk about how to manage modules in NestJS. A few words about Maciej, because he's quite a big contributor in NestJS. Yes, you did the first NestJS meetup, right?
Oh, was it the first, huh?
I think from what I've been tracking.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's possible.
Okay, nice. You are staying humble. He organized the first NestJS talk, created the CQRS library, right? Or contributed to it?
I think that was actually exactly this presentation as Dominik Ostrowski was presenting CQRS at the time. So yeah, this is the same presentation, a little bit better this time, but it's the first time I will present it in English. So let's see how it.
Don't worry, I think lots of people are not native English or American, so we're all forgiving about that. Me the first. Cool. And I hope you will enjoy this talk and learn a lot. So please, applause. Good luck.
Thank you. Okay, I think I will also start with presenting myself. I hope this is enough room for this ego that was increased right now. So yeah, I'm working with NestJS since late 2018, I think, but real stuff started in 2019. I think that was like a year since the first release. And I enjoy this technology so much that I launched the first meetup that we did mostly in Poland. And I'm super excited that I can be here because I knew that there is one more meetup in Europe beside mine. And today I'm here, we are crossing our paths, that's awesome. Yeah, I also contribute to NestJS. I did enough contributions to earn a contributor badge at official NestJS Discord, also an MVP. So with Papuch we have an access to a hidden channel. Thanks to that, we knew some more stuff. And when it comes to commercial experience, I think the most interesting part is that I was able to work together with the creator of NestJS at his company, Trilon. And interesting thing that happened there that I can also share with you regarding the previous presentation. There was that time when we have been working at a project with multi-tenancy, and I thought, Kamil, man, do we really need to recreate all those providers every time? Maybe we can create them once for a specific tenant. And he was like, it is possible. You need to do one workaround, but maybe it should be an official feature. And that's how we have now durable providers. And I'm not working there anymore, but my work looks pretty similar. I was an architect and consultant there. And I'm still doing that stuff with NestJS as my main technology. And I think this is enough. Let's move to the topic. So NestJS and its modules. So let's start with the main actor here. I know that this is new for some of you. So NestJS is a different framework, one of the many that we have in Node.js ecosystem. You also thought that, okay, not just shiny stuff, so let's start with a little bit of criticism. So on the landing page of NestJS, there is at the beginning an information that Nest is a progressive Node.js framework for building efficient, reliable, and scalable server-side applications. And I don't like descriptions like that, to be honest. Like, I can show you a hammer, and in my opinion, this is an amazing hammer for building modern, large-scale houses. Everyone can say that. And we end up that the hammer also can hurt you. It's not like you will use this one and your project is always successful. And the same applies to our beloved framework. Because building an application can often look like this. So for those who don't know, in NestJS we use modules to group pieces of our code together to build some sort of isolation, and later you can connect them together and you have an application. And everything starts with app module, which is a root for every NestJS application. And often you have also users, let's say users module, always like that. Maybe you have also some, a module for notifications. For example, you create a new user and want to send a registration email. But with notifications, it's also often you also need to fetch some information about the users, for example, to know what's his email, so where to send it. A cat is also a favorite animal of the community, so maybe we have also a module for cats. Users import cats modules because you want to display what cat the user has. You must also import it by the application. And the application is bigger and bigger, and we have al dente spaghetti code between our modules and its dependencies. And what is this is especially painful in JavaScript and NestJS, because such situation ends up with a specific error that is often especially noticed by people that are new in NestJS. But basically it means that NestJS can no longer recognize what are the dependencies, because in JavaScript, when you have a circular, there is an undefined, so good luck with that. And there is a workaround, even specified in the error, that you can just use forward ref, and later, indeed, NestJS can recognize what was meant to be imported, even if at first it would be recognized as just undefined. And I think it's important to speak about this topic, because you can find in a lot of places on the Stack Overflow, on the Discord, that people struggle with working with modules and dealing with this circular dependency. So, yeah, we'll talk about this evening. And so I will show you why we fail and end up in a situation that we cannot longer develop our application. How to actually do it properly, so how to find good boundaries for our modules, and we should actually also talk what's the purpose of those modules, because we have a problem but we don't even know why we face it. So let's start. How we define modules. we'll stick with the cats example. It's like in every example of NestJS application, there must be a module and service for cats, so will not be different here. We have basic methods for managing a collection of any entity, so we can add new record, we can read from the collection, update and remove everything. And so far, everything is great. This is simple, and it looks like we will succeed, because so far everything is okay. So we move further. Our application is not that simple. It's not just managing a collection. We have two business methods, which is adopt and return a cat. We may have more of them. Maybe we also want to track if a cat changes place, etc. But for this presentation, we will focus mostly on those two. And when it comes to logic under those use cases, so let's say that we will start the adoption process, and first what we will do is checking if the new owner actually is a trustworthy person, so we can give this cat's life to his hands. And if not, if the system decides that no, we'll stop this process at this point, and what happens next actually is not important here. And when it comes to returning a cat, we want to remember that this person did such a thing and will probably forbid doing another adoption, because we care about our poor cats. We don't want them to move places every month. And if we take a look from a higher perspective, probably this service will live in some module. Let's say it will be cats module. And as we have seen, there is a dependency on a client service. So we want to show it here. And from the technical perspective, in the module definition, cats module, we must put clients module into the imports. Okay, moving on. We add another feature, which is sponsor feed. So this is maybe some sort of our business model that we will have money to buy feed for our cats, and thanks to that, a possible owner will have a higher possibility that will allow him to do an adoption. And additionally, we track in our system cat's budget. So if someone sponsors a feed for a specific cat, we want to track that as a cat's budget. So now we have another dependency. Now client's service and module depends on the cats module. And our happy development ends here, because we have just faced the most common, I think, error in NestJS, which is circular dependency. And that means that unless we change something in our module structure, we cannot run this application anymore, unless we use forward ref, but this is not our goal today. So if you ask me what we did wrong here, I would say that we were focused on the logical cohesion instead of a functional one. But what does it mean? We were focused on nouns. So often we say that software should reflect the reality. And in reality, we know that client exists, we meet them every day, and even more often we see and visit our cats, so we want to reflect this in our code. However, what we should focus is actually creating a model that will help us solve some problems, and it means we should focus on verbs. So in particular, in the NestJS application, what we do wrong is that we build modules around entities, maybe around database tables that we already have in mind. We have planned how the database will look like, and we try to just reflect it on the application design, while we should build modules and entities and database tables around a specific problem or process, so basically some action and intention, so actually a verb. Okay, so with that new knowledge in our toolbox, let's try to refactor our application. So this is where we have finished. Let's simplify it a little bit. So we'll do the first change. So we'll create a module focused on a verb, on activity, which is an adoption. I know that now it's a noun, but it's a verb-based one. And we move the methods that are related to adoption into that module, and immediately we have solved our problem. There is no circular dependency anymore, so we can develop our application further. Actually, you can already remember this, that you don't need to always refactor entire application. If there is a situation where you add a feature and this pushes you to create some circular dependency, you can just move this new feature into a dedicated module, or the part of the code that you must import, that your feature depends on, also into an independent module, and actually you can, for quite a long time, deliver this way, and there will be no blocker. But today we want to go further, and we move another functionality related to some sort of an activity instead of an entity, which is verification, into its own module. And we move specifically methods from client service. And now also the dependency changes. Adoption now directly use some functionalities from the verification module. There is still the increased adoption probability in the client's module, so we move it as well. Okay, let's check what is left. There is this sponsor feed use case, and why it even exists under clients module. It has nothing to do much with the client itself, but this is also some common case that if some new functionality doesn't fit to any module that we already have, it will be implemented under the users module, or in our case clients, because this is simply executed by a client. However, it's actually worth moving into its dedicated module. All those animations were just to create some space for this new module. And so we move this sponsor feed, and now our dependencies look like that. And the last thing, we are also going to move increase cat budget into budget module. And now cats and clients are empty, but we cannot forget that there are still the code created to collection management in both services, but now they are responsible only on this specific job, and nothing that is related to business logic itself exists there. And this is actually the end of this refactor, but if that's so simple, I think everyone would do it this way, but it isn't. Why? Let's imagine real view of such application. So we can see some cat preview where we have information about its name, breed, age, and the owner. So pretty basic use case. But looking at our design right now, let's see from where we need data to even display this. So we need information about the cat. We also now need information from the adoption module because we don't know who the owner is. And if we know who is the owner, probably we just know the ID, we still need to get the name. So information from 3 different modules, while previously maybe everything could exist under cats, right? So now the question even is where we want to put the endpoint, into cats, clients, adoption. Let's say we put the endpoint under cats module, but we just solved the problem with too much dependencies, and this will bring new one. So have we solved anything? So what we actually did previously was building the fundamental components and modules that now we can combine together to build specific for our application use cases. And let's say that I call it cat preview. So this can be also a module, and we just need to integrate with those basic components. So we solved one problem, but we also created another one. Another example could be actually adding a cat, because of course we need to put all those basic information into the same collection as the rest of the cats, but maybe we also at the beginning already need to make it available for an adoption and add some basic budget. So again, we have some sort of a higher level module that represents a process or a view on the client side, and this will coordinate the work that must be done to satisfy this feature between those modules that are more related to the business processes and rules. Yeah, so for the sake of having reusable components, we now faced the challenge of integrating them, and we have a lot of patterns that we can use here, and probably worth a dedicated presentation. And I have also some opinion about this problem. So in NestJS, we put a lot of work into defining modules. We often create more problems than getting benefits. And I have a question, like, what is wrong with just doing it that way? So it's really common that we create a lot of small modules in NestJS, but actually, is it that bad if we just put everything under app module and don't care about those dependencies between them? And I think we can also look at this problem from a perspective that what we did was actually applying best practices from object-oriented programming into the world of modules. So basically, we add new layers of abstraction where we see the problems that actually come from the very bottom of the design. So maybe there's no point in splitting our application, adding those new layers of abstraction, if it makes it more difficult to refactor or bring or complicate the problems. So we need to answer the question why we even need modules, because maybe we don't need them at all if this is just a problem. One of the reasons that you can exactly read between GitHub issues specified by the creator of NestJS is that modules are like the idea of bounded context from domain-driven design, where you have just a public interface for the rest of the world, and you have some internals that are more complicated, change more often, and actually nobody should know how things work internally. But in practice, I think modules are too small. They don't represent this concept, and this is too easy to break this rule. So I don't buy actually this reason. Another purpose for modules is that you can use them to configure your application. So, for example, libraries are a great example, because having just some sort of a code in your Node modules is not enough to be a part of your application. So you can collect it as a module, and later in the NestJS application you import it somewhere, and now the application will start to use it. So when it comes to libraries, yes, it makes a lot of sense. And another case is when you have a lot of common components, but you have, for example, two applications. One is for users, and you have maybe another instance for admin panel. So using modules for that allow you to exclude some part of your application from the admin panel, and another one from the API for the user. And the last one, the last purpose is that you can specify using the module the smallest component that you actually want to test. So when you want to write a fast test that is not flaky, so not unexpected things are happening in the background, you will collect them together as some sort of a functionality that you can test in isolation. And if you write tests, then this is very possible that you will end up with our final design. But if you are not doing that, then just put everything under app module and don't change it unless you see a need. But this touches a topic of being a pragmatic developer, especially in the context of NestJS. But this is also worth dedicated presentation that maybe next time I will do. And that's all for this topic today. And thank you.
Thanks a lot for sharing this knowledge, because it does not seem like the sexiest topic ever, but it's really an essential in SJS, because if you did not encounter those issues with modules, well, you did not really build an SJS application, or you are a genius. I don't know what's most realistic. But yeah, really thank you for sharing this knowledge and experience, because we all fall into those traps if we don't know about it. So thanks again. Does anyone have any question about NestJS application design, modules in general, how to organize modules? Oh, I see one. I see two. Okay, first. Oh, I think it's. Yeah. This other one.
So it's more a question about your opinion, or for the whole audience, in which kind of direction will NestJS maybe go in the future, because it was heavily inspired by Angular, as we all know, and they get rid of models. And if you're using the generator right now with NestJS, you're also starting mainly in the app model. So what is your opinion, what the future will bring? And yeah, I'm also interested in other people's opinion here.
That's a good one.
Okay, so when it comes to modules specifically, exactly this question, after the decision that Angular team made, was raised on the GitHub in one of the issues, and there is already an answer from Kamil, and it is that Angular had their reasons to remove modules, and this doesn't apply to the backend at all, so they will stay. Yeah, and when it comes to the direction itself, so actually the topic from the beginning of the meetup, I also could add that Kamil always mentioned that this will be a very small library, like mostly about the framework, not about every additional package that could be an extension to it. So the framework, I think, is quite stable, so it's more like on the community side to add those extensions to build the roadmap. I don't think Kamil plans to do it by himself. He's mostly about the core. He's focused on that.
If I may add, I'm also in the opinion that modules should stay, because you have so much initialization logic potentially for a given module that where would you do that otherwise? How could you conditionally load services based on, I don't know, some initialization, some environment variables, for instance?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I guess that's why recently there was that, what's the name of this function? Load when, or that allows to conditionally load a module based on the presence of an environment variable.
Yeah, but you're right. On the front end, you have always some sort of a router, and basically modules are routers, sort of, for a backend application, right?
Anyone wants to add up on the modules topic, or another question? Modules. Yeah? Okay. You also?
Another question.
Yeah, don't worry, you get the mic. So you mentioned that modules, that's basically OOP ABC, right? And that's general for most programming languages. So where is it so specific in NestJS? I didn't get the point. Like, why is that so important topic for newcomers to think about modules when you would do that in any other language, I assume?
First of all, in most Node.js frameworks, there is no concept of a module. This is like
first introduced to this ecosystem by NestJS. So when you are moving from Express, for example, to NestJS, this is the first thing that you don't get. So that's why it's important to learn about them at the beginning of your journey. And that there was also like a second part of the question, right? Why we need them, or?
No, where does the NestJS specific issues, or is it more like the users, the developers' reasoning issues in general?
So NestJS is inspired by the Angular, but of course it's not like the enough explanation why they are there. So also this is mostly about creating their own dependency injection system, and this is how they decided that they will manage what has to be injected into a service in the current scope. You can use modules to replace a bunch of services at once, and this is just their decision to follow how Angular do it, and that's all. There are already other frameworks that you do it in a different way. You have also libraries specifically for dependency injection that don't use modules, but here it works, let's say. Simply following Angular, not creating some Camille's idea, just he was able to use what Google delivered, just a little bit different.
Yeah, it's a JavaScript class, basically. It stays within that context, right?
It is a class, but it's not the most important. Actually, the metadata that tells what is a part of this module and what dependencies it uses is more important, not the class itself. Yeah, but this is basically just some sort of annotation to create later a tree of dependencies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, thank you for this talk. I think it's very important that you touch this subject, because I think this is like one of the most, the worst issues that newcomers have, that they think that everything should be a module, that every database table should have a module and everything is a module. But I agree with your sentiment of like, you don't need modules for everything. Modules should be like your bounded context, and your application was one bounded context. It was one, like, it was basically an adoption application. So why should you split it into more than one like module? But also we also have to consider different kinds of modules, right? Because there's like application modules which implement features, but there's also like infrastructure modules which provide access to your database event brokers and stuff, and like utility modules. So there's all different kinds. And I think what you touched was like those feature modules or application modules, which don't need to be as granular. But also to like to answer this the previous guy's question about like what the module is. Basically, module is a dependency injection container. That's basically what a module is, and I think it's really not so stressed. It's we have dependency injection containers in all, like in Spring, Java. If you work with that, if you work with .NET, in C#, it's basically the same thing. Like we have some dependency injection container, we register classes to it, and it provides us back. With Nest, we can structure this container, so it can one dependency injection container that like includes another ones, and that's how we structure the dependencies. We can swap them. We don't have, but we can also have one big one. I forgot what I wanted to ask. I'm so sorry, but I will. Yeah. I will remember. Oh yeah, well, what do you think about the NestJS documentation? Because I think it teaches the wrong thing about modules. I think it teaches you exactly what you showed at the beginning of the presentation, that you should split your app by entity. You should split it by noun, which is the wrong way of doing it.
I should have a slide right now. Like, I was waiting for this question. Yeah, so basically, I think this is a problem with every documentation. Like the problem and at the same time, not problem at all, because a documentation is focused on showing how the framework works, how to design your application. So you have now a decision. You can either create an enterprise example how to use my framework, or I will use the simplest example, so it will be easy for you to simply copy this example and make it running, but you will not be taught how to design your application right now. So most of the times the examples of every framework is just create, read, update, delete feature, because they focus on showing you that the framework basically works, not what to do next with your architecture. And yeah, this is exactly like the intention of the creator. Another thing is that the documentation is open source and you can contribute to it, so you can improve it if you want.
Thank you.
It's just a matter of spending time on building enterprise examples.
Here you go, your ticket, well deserved. So much knowledge. I hope people are ready.
And I can also add a few sentences to what you said before. Basically, it's also like people come from Express and they exactly ask why, what's the goal of dependency injection. And as I said about the modules, also like the whole point of dependency injection is mostly about using it or providing different dependency for testing, right? So that's the point of dependency injection, and also that's the point of creating a new module. Because you want to isolate for test something or replace a dependency, then you have a perfect advisor that, okay, here is the boundary, here you have a need to actually do any work. If you don't have this advisor, it's likely that you will predict completely different application, completely different module structure than actually will be useful for you. So that's why I mentioned just putting everything in the app module, and the need will come probably, unless you are not testing or don't have a need.
Okay, another question over there. Daniel. Yes, thank you.
And what are the main drawbacks of using forward ref, for example? And is there any case where it may be the best choice to use forward ref instead of creating a new model for that specific some specific method? Because at start, when I started developing my first NestJS application, I went hard with forward ref everywhere. Because yeah, you said this is suggested by NestJS, so why not using it? And then I discovered that yeah, sometimes it's better to split things. But at first, maybe it could be a hint to also specify that the user should use a different approach. Not just say use forward ref, because that's the easy choice, but sometimes this leads to abuse of that thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because indeed in the error itself there is simply a link to forward ref that you can use it. But I think when you enter the documentation, there is a red hint that you shouldn't do it, but it's a workaround. So I think it is said that it's not the best choice. However, dividing modules, also from my presentation, seems like the best option, but actually this may be also a suggestion that they should be simply merged. So you will not have, if both services are part of the same module, then you don't have actually any dependency between modules anymore. So yeah, either you split or even you can merge. And eventually come with just a single large app module that works.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the talk. I really like the pragmatic point of view. So if you don't do the pragmatic NestJS talk, please hit me up. I'm very interested in that.
Okay.
And maybe then there's a short question. Do you also have a pragmatic tip for global modules? So if there's also like a rule of thumb you would recommend, yeah, is there something from your experience that you would want to share?
For what kind of modules?
Global modules. Like when would you use them compared to the other ones? Is there also some kind of secret tip from your experience?
Sorry, you said to lower...
Global modules?
Okay, I see. Yeah, I think exactly tests are the best advisor for me. Like this is something that will challenge everything, like the code itself, the design, etc. So actually, if you are testing a lot, then yeah, you will end up with a lot of modules probably. Yeah, this is exactly the challenge that you need. It will tell you what are the boundaries the best, and if you don't have them, then for a long time you will not need to divide anything unless you are planning to split your application into independent microservices, etc. Then you have a strict need that you must put something into a common part or into a specific one. And I can also imagine exactly what our colleague said, that you, of course, need the infrastructure-related modules. So this is basically what you will always import. Even if you have one app module, then for sure you need to still import the type ORM, etc. And after that, you have your business logic that is just a huge collection of services, and one app module that will tell that yes, this is launched as a single application together, and splitting it in additional modules exactly could come from, okay, but I want to test just a small part, or I want to deliver as a different application this part, and we'll share this code. So a need is always the best advisor, because if you try to predict what you will need, how many applications will you have, okay, you may be right at some point, but I don't think it's that costly to do it just in time, instead of trying to predict it, and in many cases you will end up that, okay, you spend some time on a thing that actually don't give you any benefit after all.
Mm-hmm. Got it, thank you. Someone else?
If I may add, regarding your question, Dustin, did you ever use DevTools, the NestJS DevTools?
I planned to, but we didn't do it.
You did not.
Should we do it? It's a user here.
Did anyone use NestJS DevTools? Do anyone even know NestJS DevTools?
I know.
Of course.
I know about that.
Well, if you would start to use the NestJS DevTools, you will see the impact of using global modules. You will see how much the scope of modules that are global leak on other modules that might not necessarily need some dependencies, and that might become a bit clearer. Why sometimes it might just be an handicap for too many modules, and the cost of avoiding to import the same module over and over might sometimes be better than just making it global so that you make developers' life easier. Yeah, so yeah, that's what I discovered when finally using it after 4 years using NestJS. So yeah, that's a little advertisement time for NestJS DevTools. Does anyone have any other question? Yeah? Okay, coming.
Not directly regarding modules, but you talked or you spoke a lot about dependency injection. And also because we were talking about Angular and where NestJS comes from, the Angular is moving away a bit from constructor-based injection and decorator-based injection, because one of the reasons for them was that decorators in constructor for constructor parameters will most likely not be standardized in ECMAScript, and also initialization-wise, like it's a bit different with ECMAScript classes than TypeScript classes. So it's not like they are executed in order and not like constructor first and then fields are initialized. So I'm curious if there is any, I don't know, idea or plan for Nest to adopt that inject function for dependency injection as well?
So when it comes to the standards of ECMAScript, NestJS have other problems and even bigger, because everything there works thanks to the decorators, and there is no plan so far. On just crossed fingers that it will not be removed from TypeScript that soon.
But there is a proposal at stage 3. So I think there will be a standardization. It's just slightly different from TypeScript, but I think it's not that problem with decorators in general. It's just like specific use cases. Like you showed this one example where you use inject for the injection token in constructor for the arguments. And I don't know if this will ever be standard.
Yeah, when it comes to those decorators inside the constructors, I don't know. I mean, there still is a fallback with the use factory. So, but I don't think this will be something that will people enjoy. But as I said, specifically around this feature, I don't know. But yeah, the whole migration to what is now the standard is really difficult for libraries, including NestJS. Also, like the TypeORM strongly relies on how currently decorators from TypeScript works, the experimental one. So we'll see how it will be handled by the entire ecosystem.
Thanks.
Thank you. Take it. I guess you were aware, but you can still use the inject decorator outside of the constructor. Does not resolve the end issue, but it's a possibility. Quite useful if you have some class extension and you don't want to mess up with the class that you extended expectations.
In Angular we added just a function that's called inject, and you use it.
I'm aware of that. It's not really the same case, but you can still use inject outside of the constructor. That was the rest of my point. It's not really the same approach. And
and the trade-off is also that in that case you cannot write a test that is not using the test container or test bed anything like that. Now, with this function, it is necessary because it doesn't know what to provide, and I think Kamil will. It's a huge trade-off for him, I think.
On those words, any other question? All the knowledge get out. Great. Well, thanks again, Maciej. Yes. I don't have to say it once more. The raffle will be kept private, so bye-bye our YouTube huge audience. Thanks for joining us.